First of all, congratulations on becoming Avamore's first ever principal hire outside of the existing four founding principals. How do you see your role changing as a result of this?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that. Yeah, it means a lot to come from the four guys I've been working with for nearly 2 years now. They've grown a great business, and it's great to be able to be part of that management team now. I think realistically, from a day-to-day basis, we're growing the underwriting team, and that's always going to be my main focus, to continue to grow the team and to continue to perform well for our clients. And that's going to be a range of getting completions done quickly, and also liaising with our third-party providers as we have done in the past. Inevitably, my role will change slightly in terms of managing the business alongside the other principals, and hopefully I'll grow more into that as the time goes on.
How are you looking to also strengthen the business this year in your new position, and what additional insight and expertise will you be bringing?
I think it's I've got my own way of doing things, I think, and that's all the principals do, and I think that's why it's important that we have that kind of that vision across the business, but also that we put our own stamp onto how we do things. So the way that we'll look to strengthen is to bring in some of the ideas that I've had from previous businesses and from the background that I have from banking, from peer-to-peer lending, from the MBA that I've completed. And then also just to strengthen our core team. We've got a really good underwriting team, in particular at Avamore, with myself and with Rowan and Chris, and we're going to be looking to expand that in the future and bring on some really great people to continue to provide great service to our clients. Further than that, it'll just be to help strengthen the processes and systems. We're still quite a young company, and getting those really firm processes in place which we can kind of run as more of a machine, so we can get more completions and we can perform better for our clients.
In addition to obviously expanding the underwriting team, how have your underwriting processes changed during 2020, and will you be looking to make further enhancements to them this year? I know you mentioned you'll be strengthening them, but in what way exactly?
Well, I think you can first of all tell I'm in my home office, or second bedroom as it is. So the processes we've been using definitely have changed. We were very much a in-office business, and I think we'll be going back towards that. But we've also taken on board a lot of the learning points that we've picked up as a result of the lockdowns. For example, we've done virtual site visits, we've done virtual borrower meetings, we've slightly increased our geographies to include areas such as Leeds and Manchester, so those virtual site visits are really helpful. We've brought on different processes for KYC like Nevo. We've been using people like VAS for our valuations. We're trying to be as streamlined as possible. You can be human resource intensive, or you can be technologically intensive, and I prefer to be the latter. It just means that we can work more efficiently as a business using the same amount of overhead. So I think we'll continue to move down that way to digitize a lot of our processes. I don't think we're quite ready to be doing AVMs quite yet. Maybe on some smaller bridging stuff in the future, but I think that's the way the market is moving generally. I've always said on other interviews that the core tenets of property lending are still there, and we've been very slow as an industry to pick up some of the other digitizations that a lot of other areas of the finance industry have picked up quickly. But I do see that COVID is kind of increasing that momentum, be it the land registry, be it Companies House, be it how solicitors execute documents. So it's a good trend, and hopefully it will actually last post lockdown, and we won't move back to some of the legacy systems that we were using.
What kind of risks do you see with ABNs at the moment? Because I know you're obviously hesitant to use them on larger loans.
I think one of probably the benefits of ABNs is, I think that you're always going to go to the lowest common denominator. I mean, I haven't seen many of the models, but it would make sense for the people who are using those models, because they're putting their PI on, to kind of go down to the lowest possible level in terms of the valuations. You wouldn't want to be stretching those, which you can potentially have more of an input because of a bit of personal insight into the transaction, or the comparables. You actually look a bit more deeply into it. I think with an ABN, the main issue is you don't actually get there and you actually understand the asset in particular. So there's always going to be little areas with a potential asset where having somebody on site and actually seeing it is going to provide a lot more background as to that particular asset. We deal a lot in the kind of F&E space, so finish and exit, where you know, it'd be difficult to take an AVM on that. I think in the bridging space, in the buy-to-let space, I think it's an extremely useful tool, because you just have the level of data that's required to provide those automated valuations, similar to, you know, credit cards can now look at your credit file and ultimately give you a statistic about how likely you are to have a credit default. If you've got 1,000 different comparables, it's a lot more easy to give that ABM. We're dealing in situations normally where, you know, we've got 10 good comparables, and in that situation, you know, you really want someone actually looking at those comparables and making sure they do provide the kind of valuation that you're looking for.
Of course. You mentioned earlier as well that you've expanded your geography, and you noted Leeds and Manchester. Using the tech that you've got now, and being able to do meetings virtually, will you be looking to kind of expand even further afield or into new areas?
I think what's really important for us as a business is to make sure that we've got, you know, good people in the areas that we want to be lending into. So where we are expanding in terms of our, you know, originators into the areas that we're looking to move into. And I think, you know, we are a relationship driven business. Whether that be your originators, you know, your underwriters, your credit analysts, your asset managers at the back, the whole way through the business, we're very relationship focused, very client focused. So if we're going to move into an area, I think it would be one that we want to have a good coverage in there with a good Avamore presence, I suppose, rather than just, okay, there's a potential deal up there, we'll do it because it fits our metrics. We want to have, you know, have that good footprint up there already. Or down, of course. I don't mean just up.
You've obviously, you know, spoken in detail about the enhancements that you've brought into the underwriting team. What advice would you give to brokers to ensure the underwriting process is as streamlined as possible during this year?
I think the key is always get the information to the underwriters, get the information to the solicitors as soon as is realistically possible. It's you know, around the edges is where you know, people take a view with underwriting. You know, underwriters really you know, an assault really, because, you know, they're putting in a bit of a view, but the main documents that we require, your MS reports, your valuations, everything you need for your ROTs, you know, your searches, etc., are relatively standard. So, you know, having all that kind of core information to hand and available for the solicitors, for the valuers, for the MSs is really the major way that we can streamline that process. And I know, you know, everyone always says, okay, we're waiting for them. So if we just, you know, can bring everything together, and it's a thing that we're trying to improve, and I think the industry's trying to improve as a whole in terms of getting, you know, improving legacy systems. Can we use Dropbox to make sure that everyone gets the information at the same time? Can we, you know, improve communications in any particular way? Can we use some of the, you know, the tools that we have, whether it's a WhatsApp, a Teams, or whatever it is, to make sure everyone's in the loop at all times? Because, you know, unlike some types of lending, I always go back to credit card because it's the one that's taken technology on the most. You know, you put your application in and it just goes through a process. We have, you know, underwriters, brokers, borrowers, solicitors, MS, but there's a lot of people that need to be kept in the loop at all times. And I think that's the main key going forward, is keeping the whole group in the loop all the time, making sure that not one individual in there has all the keys, I suppose, and that they make sure that everyone knows all the information. So that's definitely top of my list for this year, is to communicate everything better. I think especially during COVID, where, you know, things are difficult enough as it is already. Just keeping those one-line emails saying, you know, we're progressing, we've got this information, we've got that, we've got this, we need that, indeed, rather than just sitting on it, is super key from all parties.
You've obviously discussed how your team, your underwriting team, has worked over the past year and will be working this year. Do you think the role in the bridging market as a whole of the underwriter has changed as a result of the pandemic?
I think somewhat, obviously, just in terms of in terms of the core role, not so much. There's probably a little bit more credit analysis around what you actually think the impact of COVID will be on your in particular lens. You know, is the exit still there? You know, are valuations holding up? You know, strangely enough, we probably had the largest increase in house prices in UK history of about 7.5% across the board last year. So, you know, I don't think anyone expected that. maybe there was some expectation given the stamp duty regulations that were changed by the government and other factors, but that was a big change. But inherently, it's still the same job, and I think that's why we've been able to see in Avamore our volumes pick up towards the back end of the year when the market felt more comfortable, and I think it'll continue that way going forward. It is very different from when I first started underwriting. It's a very different business from then because of the technological changes that we've mentioned, and also just the demand and supply pressures from both increased amounts of funding and increased amounts of demand on specialist finances. But no, I don't think it'll change too much over the next year.
And then looking wider than underwriting, what key changes and challenges do you expect to see in the bridging market this year, and why?
I suppose exit is always the biggest one, realistically. It's getting into the deals is easy enough, but it's always going to be exit, especially when it's onto development finance. There are headwinds coming down the road, which could potentially cause delays in terms of finishing projects. And if we start to see delays in terms of finishing projects, we're going to want to push out terms for development financing, which will then stretch people's ability to refinance, because obviously as the term increases, you're going to have lower day ones or lower build facilities, and indeed if contracting takes longer, obviously larger build facilities. So those deals which were previously on the margins in terms of LTVs may find it more difficult to refinance out into development loans if you were at the higher end of those LTV spectrums. In terms of overall bridging, I expect there to actually be a lot more demand. There's going to be, people who are still holding off a little bit to see towards the end of this lockdown where things are. I think now that Brexit's amazingly behind us, we're going to have a little bit more stability. But that's just in one area where we're going to see we're going to have knock-on effects for probably a 24-month period. So there are some headwinds coming. But overall, I think demand will still be there for bridging and kind of like finish and exit kind of products.
And recently, BNC published that Avamore had reached the £250 million of total lending milestone. What are your ambitions and lending targets for this year, and how will you meet those?
I think the way we finished the back end of last year was extremely positive. As I'm sure everyone had, they had big aspirations for 2020, start of the decade. And we were certainly one of those companies, and I think we had a plus 100 million target, and we got very, very close to that, which in the context of COVID, I thought was a fantastic achievement. And we've got to this 250 million milestone now, and I think hopefully that's just the first of many milestones. So continue to push on towards that 500 for this year and for next year, realistically. And the way that we'll do that is again by providing great service to our clients, and hopefully we'll see that number just continue to increase, and we'll push those targets even further out.
And then finally, you mentioned a bit earlier, you expect to see a higher demand for bridging finance this year. What other opportunities do you foresee for this year for the business and also the bridging market as a whole?
Yeah, I think alongside bridging, one of our we're more towards the heavy end of bridging or the light end of dev, I suppose. So, I really see a good opportunity just for Avamore, I suppose, and for other businesses. Is that kind of finish and exit product that we do market quite well, because it's one of our specialties, and it's something we do very well. There's going to be projects, obviously, because of the headwinds that I've just mentioned, that are going to run a little bit over. And it's not going to be a function of the fact they're not good projects anymore. It's going to be a function of the fact that people only put money out for 15 months and it's got an extra 3 months to build and 6 months to sell. And I think that's going to be a really important market for us. And as long as we've got a good experienced borrower and we can see the developments being moving well, that's a product that we really like, and it's one we do very well. So hopefully we'll see more of that going forward. And I think ground up is one where we'd like to do more. If possible, it's obviously it's towards the higher. Obviously, that's more towards the heavy end of dev, realistically. So it's a little bit outside of our core kind of products, but one where there's also potential, obviously, with the the lack of housing in the UK.